Hi all, this video is some patch notes for a song I posted a couple days ago. If you'd like to listen to it first, go ahead and follow the link below. So we're going to start off at the end of the patch, which is Babel. So Babel's really the heart of this patch. It's doing most of the heavy lifting, most of the interesting things. So we have three things going into Babel. You can see them on the scope with the green, the blue, and the red line. That's the harmonic shift oscillator. And then one triphase, and then a second triphase. And we'll talk a little bit more about those sound sources later. For now, just know there's three sound sources. They're going into Babel. And then what Babel's doing, it has a couple different things that it does, right? So it gives you either the maximum, the minimum. And as you can see, that yellow line there is tracing the minimum of all of these audio signals. The maximum, now it's tracing the maximum of them. Or exclusive sum is where it gets really interesting. So exclusive sum is sort of this balanced middle. It's sort of like ring modulation or like multiplication. You could say it more precisely by sort of, a multiplication looks like a three-dimensional curve. And if you straighten out all of those lines, that's what this middle thing is doing. You could also say, it's the analog version of an exclusive OR. So lots of different ways to think about it, but it makes some really interesting sounds, And of course, unlike a ring modulator, you can have as many inputs as you want. And then, as you can see, what it's doing is it's following the maximum sometimes. It's also sometimes following the minimum. It's also sometimes following the flipped maximum or the flipped minimum. And so when that flip happens, it's happening around a value that's determined by the center knob. So when you turn the center knob, you determine where that flip's taking place, which ends up being kind of just a way of fading this between a sort of almost more minimum or more maximum signal and this sort of balanced middle. So lots of interesting things that it does. So what we're taking here is we're using this exclusive sum output. We're mixing it also with the any output, which makes it a little bit more full. Right now, the quad mid side is just acting like a glorified mixer. We could, use the side channel as well, and that can be interesting, but I'm not doing that in this patch. Okay, so moving on to the sound sources, we have the harmonic shift oscillator, which is making the bass note. That's controlled by this keyboard. And then this triphase is droning, while this triphase is controlled by this keyboard. So at that point, they're all playing the same note. But yeah, as you can see, when you hit different notes, it mixes together in a non-standard way, right? We don't just get the waves next to each other, we get them interacting. Of course, that's also true of addition. If you know about beat frequencies, we get a sort of beat frequencies with this because the phase relationships are still changing in relation to each other. But with just beat frequencies with addition, you have waves interacting rather than just being next to each other. But here we all obviously get that to a greater degree. So there's one other thing that I have going on in this patch, really, and that's I'm taking the minimum output here putting it into the in of inertia, and I'm doing an envelope follow with it. So the way that you always set up a function generator, any function generator, to follow an envelope, you have the frequency or the rise frequency maximum, so it's rising very quickly. And then you have it fall more slowly than that. So what it'll do is it'll hit the peak of the wave, and it won't quite fall down before the next peak comes up. So it'll just sort of follow along with the peaks of all of the waves. Now, unlike a lot of other function generators, this has, or any other function generator, this has momentum. So we have this turned up about 2/3 of the way. And what that ends up doing is really gives it this sort of almost plunky thing. You can hear that more on some notes than others. So you can hear here, there's almost this plunk in the bass. And that's happening because it's rising quickly, and that rise momentum will keep it rising and then just sort of emphasize that. And so you get like this much bigger change than you would just from the beat frequencies alone. Okay, so what's happening with this output of inertia is it's going to this big bunch of mults, and then on the one hand it's going to these 4 phases, and you can see the attenuators are pointing in opposite directions. So it's giving it both of these waves more phase difference, which that ends up affecting how they all interact within Babel. And then it's also going back to the CV input for that center value in Babel. Okay, and that's it for the regular patch. I should also say at the end of that song, I do this. So that's just an LFO that's going into this 4th input of Babel. And so you're seeing it mix both CV and audio all at the same time. And that does some really nice things, right? It sort of determines which of the waves is getting priority at any given time, which is coming through, and how that's all sounding. One of the effects that it has is to kind of allow a little bit more of the independent notes to come through, because there's a time where they're sort of shining along with the LFO, and yeah, so it's doing a bunch of good things. So that's going into there through this mechanical switch over here. And the way that Babel's inputs work is they are impedance driven. So they're not detecting anything via normals. It knows that something's plugged in because it's trying to pull it towards a particular voltage. So if you listen carefully, not as much, but you can hear a little bit. Yeah, there we go. So that's just plugged into 0 volts. As you can tell, that's not the same as being unplugged. But the nice thing about these mechanical switches, right, is they're real switches, and they really just disconnect it. It's not connected to anything. They don't spit out 0 volts. So yeah, that's the patch. It's relatively simple. It's really mostly Babel doing its thing. And you know, I love using Babel this way. And one of the reasons why is that it makes me think about mixing differently in general, and sort of harmonic relationships differently in general. Like, we have this idea that harmonic relationships are a particular thing because we're always thinking about harmonic relationships in terms of a mixer at the end. But what if it's not a normal mixer? What if it's this? Like, what's the harmonic relationship there versus there? When, you know, I mean, like, there's still some things that carry over. There's, you know, relationships of ratios, of frequency ratios and stuff like that, that end up producing different things. But of course, it's very different. One of the ways it's different is that the tuning is much more sensitive. So if you listen, I'm just going to adjust this drone one just the tiniest bit out of tune. You can hear even there, that's some extreme beating. And it's just like, you know, that's like maybe 2 hertz off or something like that. So it's really sensitive to microtonal stuff. And actually the way that I have this tuned, these 2 oscillators, the 2 triphase oscillators, are tuned exactly together. But one of the things about even tempered tuning is that means that third is not actually correct. So one thing that I did to sort of help with that is I tuned the harmonic shift oscillator, the bass note, so that the third of the note is correct. So the harmonic shift oscillator and the triphase drone are actually, and both triphases are actually, they have a different root note by a couple cents. And that helps to bring out this sort of slow motion type of thing. It actually sounds like the harmonic shift oscillators drifted a little bit more into tune. Like I said, it's very sensitive, so, you know, just little bits can really change the sound a lot. Like there we have a lot of motion, just tapping that knob a couple times. And whether that motion's better or not, you know, that depends on the song. So play around with that, you know, play around with weird tunings. If I had a microtonal MIDI to CV thing, I'd definitely be messing with that along with Babel. Maybe somebody has one and they can post something with some real microtonal stuff going on. That'd be exciting to hear. But yeah, just I hope you enjoyed this video. If you got something in particular out of it, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, like and subscribe. See you next time.